I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
This is real. Bojack, I mean, actually, I start the book by talking about Bojack in the Battle Royale. Mm-hmm. And then to skip ahead, I was about to tackle the question of masculinity, because there was this idea that black men were not real men, whatever that means. And because real men, quote unquote, don't allow themselves to be enslaved or pushed around under Jim Crow. And so what that does, it seems to me, is imbue in many black men this desire to overturn this stereotype, this defamation, if you like. In other words, we're responsible for our own plight. And they could do this in the boxing ring, where they could earn good money for beating white men into submission, and you could get arrested for even thinking about it once you left the ring. So this helps to create the career in the first instance of Jack Johnson, for example, Galveston, Texas, born 1878, heavyweight champion by 1910. His rising creates the need in some quarters for a so-called Great White Hope, who would restore what was thought to be the normalcy of masculinity. And he, of course, is then has criminal charges hung around his neck, not least because of his dating proclivities, and dating Euro-American women, or even marrying them for that matter. So he flees the country. In my book, Black and Brown, I talk about how he allies with the Mexican Revolution, 1910 to 1920. Then he travels overseas. He says Barcelona, his favorite town. Eventually, he has to face the music and is jailed in the United States, but he goes on and, in fact, returns to Barcelona in the 1930s, where he establishes a socialist newspaper, and then, of course, dies tragically in an accident in the 1940s. Now, of course, we all know about Joe Louis, the Brown bomber, who was also part of progressive forces. That's oftentimes forgotten. I think because of his conflict with Joe Louis, because his conflict with Jack Johnson, because he and Jack Johnson had real conflicts. But Joe Louis, of course, was a fan of Paul Robeson. You may be familiar with the Paul Robeson song. You can find it on the internet, King Joe, with Count Basie Parker, for example. And Joe Louis supported the third-party campaign of Henry A. Wallace in 1948, the last gasp, in a sense, of the left, seriously challenging for power. Of course, Henry Wallace was backed by Robeson, Shirley Graham Du Bois et al. However, because of his ties to the left, Louis also runs into stormy problems. That is to say, tax problems in the first place. And then he's perceived as veering out of his lane when, as he's retiring from boxing, he tries to, in a sense, take over the whole sport. The problem there is organized crime. And I think one of the lessons, and as a man who's written about business, I'm sure this would resonate with you. One of the lessons there is that if you think you can construct a business without having juice with the prosecutors and the district attorneys, you're basically in a fool's errand. Because if your peers and competitors have juice with the prosecutors and district attorney, that means that those legal barracudas are coming after you, which is what happened with Joe Louis, for example. So I also, of course, talk about the man once known as Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, how in some ways the Nation of Islam and the Fruit of Islam act as a kind of backup to protect him from the dire fate of boxers who did not have backup and then fell victim to organized crime, for example. So that's the story. I could go into the innards, since you're a scholar as well. A lot of the records of the New York State Athletic Commission in Albany oral histories at the University of Nevada in Las Vegas, the State Athletic Commission of California, organized crime investigations in New Jersey, many memoirs, biographies, etc. And of course, these tremendous boxing archives, which are located at the University of Notre Dame, located at Brooklyn College in New York City, etc.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.